Bricks and Minifigs is your one-stop shop for all things LEGO. Hit the link below to find a store near you.
Erik Larson and Gunnar Larson, along with Arm, all part of Panzer Bricklabs group that built this. In honor of the 80th anniversary in Normandy, we see a lot of people that do, the invasion landings and everything that's been going on. So this year we wanted to do something a little bit different and incorporate a lot of different vehicles. So we chose to do the last couple days of the Battle of Normandy when the Germans were surrounded in the Falaise pocket. And so we kind of recreated that. So I did a lot of research surrounding it, looked at what had actually happened during the battle, and recreated the main crossing the Germans broke out on the last 2 days of the battle. And that was at a town called Saint-Lambert-sur-Dive in France, which had the two bridges that German armor was able to cross over and escape from the pocket. So when we started with it, we wanted to start and model all the areas. So when the Germans initially came up to the bridges, it was overwhelmed. So they had to drop all of their horse-drawn carts, their artillery, and a lot of their slower and less useful equipment in these fields. The military police wouldn't let them across the bridges, so they could take the more high-priority vehicles across. So we've modeled that there. We've done some brick-built horses in that area and tried to show some of the destruction and some of the things they would have left behind. Moving on into the next area, it's kind of a courtyard. There was two rivers they had to cross. These buildings still really exist. If you go onto Google Earth, you can see these exact representations of these buildings there. The village hasn't changed much since the actual battle occurred, so that was something that was really useful for me to recreate the battle. A lot of people have really liked the Thor's hammers turned upside in there for the cobblestone effect. So that's been a really popular thing, as well as some of the different roof techniques we used. So what I was able to also do is the Canadian photographers were here just after the battle ended. So there was a lot of photographic evidence that we used. And if you look at the Battle of Saint-Lambert, these two Panthers were pushed into the river to move out of the roadway so vehicles could cross. The photo was taken right behind the Panthers, and there was a mortar round that had gone through the building. So we faithfully tried to recreate that aspect of it. The church was used as a command post for the German generals trying to get the units out. And there were quite a few famous Panzer units that were stuck in the circle that, had they been encircled, probably the war would have ended much earlier. There's been a lot written about that. So this was really a key battle on the Western Front. So as we continue on, they use this as a liaison area. You could go south toward Moissy Ford or go north on these roads out to the west, which people have called the Corridor of Death. A lot of people know that, where the Germans were basically annihilated. And that just shows they had a choice to make here. South was generally safe, but if you went this way, you were going to run into the Canadians who already held the town, and the Poles were also moving in as well. So as we flow through, the vehicles continue to flow through, and different elements of the units, SS, Heer, Fallschirmjägers, making their way through, and then you'll see the two roads where they're escaping. And if we go to the other side, we'll see that well. This was also, I thought was very interesting, was a French alcoholic cider press, and they actually make alcoholic cider, so we showed that. And some of the conscripted German troops were from the Eastern Front, Russian-based troops, and so they were the first to surrender. So kind of showed them just saying, hey, let's have a couple of cocktails, and let's just end the war in style here and just wait to be picked up. So there's a lot of documentation of people just more than happy to surrender. They thought at this point, after everything that had happened, the war was going to be over. So not everybody was as fanatical as to continue fighting. So here, the Americans weren't really here. They were a little bit further to south, but I wanted to give the effect of showing the pocket being closed. So we've got the 90th U.S. divisions coming up from the south, and then on the other side, as we go around the corner, we'll see the units coming through. The two roads, got destruction on this road, and then we've got Polish and Canadian units coming from the north and closing the gap. And you'll see a famous surrender scene where David Currie earned his Victoria Cross. There was Canadian war correspondents there filming it, and those are taken from direct pictures. So he's the only Canadian tanker to earn the Victoria Cross, and it was for actions here at Saint-Lambert. Also, the Poles fought their most famous battle in Europe, the Battle of the Mace, which was Hill 262, which would be a little off this, but it was hand-to-hand fighting, intense fighting, where the Poles fought literally harder, from reading all the accounts, harder than anyone fought in this battle. They really accounted themselves as well. So we included the Polish tanks and actually the Polish division sleeves on the arms. And then just on the sides of the mock, we put the Polish flag, the Canadian flag, to really indicate the troops were there. So that's a general broad overview of everything we've got going on.
Yeah. This is a fascinating layout, and it's really neat to see you kind of tackling a different part of Normandy, like you said. Yep. Very large layout. Do you know how many pieces or minifigures are in this?
There's 300 minifigures, 70 vehicles, not including artillery. And the pieces has got to be between 300 and 400,000 because you're looking at all the base below it and all the little greebling. And I don't, my wife's behind me, so we'll just leave it at that amount of pieces, right? Because she could probably look that up. So I don't have the exact count for you, but it's a lot.
Take us through some of the vehicles here and the designs there and how those came together.
Okay. Arm's got a lot of the vehicles. He's kind of made the vehicles. So because when we sat at BrickFair last year and we'd done the finished stuff before, he really wanted to do the fillet pocket, and with everything that he creates, we had the opportunity to do a lot of these vehicles. So these are all Panzer Bricklabs vehicles, and what some of my son Gunnar, he does some of the Kuba wagons and the other items. But if you want to talk about all the vehicles that are on the mock, so you can go through them, Arm.
Sure. So hi, my name is Arm, founder of Panzer Bricklabs. You want me to walk you through the vehicles? Which one would you want to start with?
Yeah, just a few highlights and some of the vehicles you got represented here on the layout.
So as Erik was talking about before, the mock is divided into 3 parts. We've got here on the right side, this is the Polish and the Canadian forces pushing up. So they would have had M4A3 Shermans. They would have had the Sherman Firefly. They had other things like Cromwells too, but we didn't have enough room to fit them into the mock. And on the other side right there, we have the American forces pincering the main German escape right here through these 2 roads. We have an M18 right there. That's the M18 Hellcat tank destroyer. Realistically, there was supposed to be M18s, M10s there, and the Americans were supposed to be a little bit further down the road, but we wanted to represent them, kind of closing the pocket. So we kind of made it, we made these 2 a little closer together just for representation purposes.
Yeah.
And then the Germans down the middle, we've got a column of the most common German armor they'd be using at the time. They had SDKFZ 251 Offs Ds. Those are the late version of the half-track with these simplified edges and shapes. These are what the Panzer Grenadiers would have used. Realistically, there weren't really enough of those half-tracks to go around, so we also added in some Opel Blitzes designed by Gunnar here. Some of the tanks, we have the iconic Panther. This is a Panther A. You can tell with its rounded mantlet and the side skirts. We also have a few knocked out Panzer IVs, like there's a Panzer IV Offs J there, right, without the side skirts, but the turret skirts. I modeled the little turret basket too, so you can kind of see like what it would have looked like before it was blown off. And we added a little bit of smoke effect with the fire too. That was really fun to do. It was like kind of a unique one where we had to design the turret ring so we could add the fire inside of the tank. But another Panzer IV here that's not blown up. This is an Offs H. This is another late war German tank that they would have used. It's got the turret skirts. It's got the side skirts as well. Another one, Stuk 3G. This was done, some German tanks were done with some oxide red because they didn't have enough paint. So we wanted to represent the late war state of Germany by having some of the tanks not fully painted. So some of them are in red, like that Stuk 3 over there, missing some of the sky skirts from battle damage. I guess we'll swing around over there. We've got another Panther. That one's in dark tan. We wanted to also add some variation in the camo because they didn't just use a tricolor, dark green, reddish brown tan. We wanted to mix it up a little bit because the Germans realistically also painted their own tanks in the field with what they had. We wanted to customize it a little bit too, so that one has the kill rings on there. So you can tell that's a really veteran Panther, right? Some of the half tracks over here. We have here an SDKFZ 11. These were the unarmored versions of the 251, and they would be used to tow things like artillery. Erik mentioned before that all the artillery was left on the other side of the road, right? But these would have been towing supplies, artillery, and these would have been used in the rear forces where they wouldn't see that much action because they were unarmored, right? Let's swing forward more that way. Now here we have a Tiger I, the most iconic tank of the war. What most people think of when they think of World War II and tanks is the Tiger I. So this is one of my favorites. This is an Offs E. So this is a late version of the Tiger. It's got the interleaving road wheels, the turret spins. All the tanks are functional. They have rolling tracks, the turret spin, right? Very smooth. We have an MG up there too. We can customize them. Some of them, they had roof-mounted MGs so that they could defend against aircraft. We can add them to any one of these. Some of the Nashorns might have them too, right? Speaking of the Nashorn, this is a tank destroyer. This is mostly used on the Eastern Front, though some of them did appear on the West. They had the most powerful 88, the long 88 gun, and they can knock out targets from miles away. So that's a very cool one. Another late war tank, we've got the Panzer IIIM. The Panzer III by 1944, 1945 was definitely outdated, so they saw limited production numbers, but they had the side skirts fitted onto them, the turret skirts fitted onto them too, and they were used in small numbers. Panthers over here, there are more Panthers by the field. The Panthers, there were actually a lot of them in Normandy, right? More than the Allies expected. So we wanted to represent that here too. We had more Panthers than Panzer IVs because of how abundant they were, right? These two are custom built. They were like built into, like we had to carve one of the Panthers up so we could make it look like it fell into the water. That was really quite fun too. This Panther is broken down, as Erik mentioned before. We wanted to show that it was broken down or burnt out by using different colors such as black or that little faded brown color to show that it was like abandoned. Going back to this half track, this is another 251, but the 251 was such an abundant vehicle. The Germans didn't have nearly as many as they should have, but some of them were retrofitted with different modifications. This one is the Pioneer version. So they had a bridge, like equipment for crossing bridges. They had like a bridge laying thing, right? So I wanted to represent different variants of the 251, and that was one of them. Similar to the Nashorn, this one is the Hummel. This one, instead of having a long 88, has a 15-centimeter artillery piece mounted onto it. It's the same chassis, but the Germans really liked this one too because they were able to move big, heavy guns on motorized vehicles, right? The unmotorized version of this one, you can see on those fields right there. That is the SFH-18. It's the 15-centimeter gun that's found on the Hummel. That's the towed version of it. So we wanted to represent that too. They didn't motorize everything. Of course, they had towed versions and untowed versions of things, right? This is another version of the SDKFZ 251. I think it's the 251/9. So like, unlike this one, which had the bridge laying one, this one has a short 75. They called it the Stummel, like the Stummel gun, the stump gun, because they would fire low velocity 75 millimeter shells at soft targets. So this was more of an infantry support half track, but they made a lot of these too. They converted a lot of 251s from them, right? And that's another Panzer IV with some of the missing skirts. We wanted to show some battle damage too, right? And now we're gonna go to what I think is one of the most interesting tanks, the S-35 Soma. So what happened during the Battle of France was France fell so quickly that they abandoned a lot of their equipment. So the Germans ended up capturing that equipment and they put them to work towing artillery or rear guard actions, I believe. So the S-35 was present in Normandy in small numbers, and we wanted to represent that little fun fact as well. Another interesting vehicle, the Panzer IIL. I believe only about 100 of these were ever made, but they did see action on the Western Front for the most part too. These were left abandoned by their crews. I believe they ran out of fuel, or we wanted to represent them as running out of fuel during the frantic escape across the bridge. Some other things worth noting. The artillery pieces right here, as I was pointed out before, they left a ton of artillery behind because they couldn't tow the artillery across the bridges because they were in such a panic to escape. So this is the 15-centimeter SFH-18, one of the most common guns that the Germans used. It was their favorite. There's the SIG-33, more of a cumbersome gun, small but cumbersome. What else do we got? We got the Nebelwerfers over there, designed by Gunner. And then I guess to finish off the mock, we'll swing around this way and we'll take a look at the SDKFZ 9, I believe this is. There are two versions of the SDKFZ 9 which I made for this mock. There's this one with the bed on the back. They made these more late war because they couldn't afford to do the more fancy SDKFZ 9 with all the side paneling. This is like the Pioneer version where they'd have a crew sitting with them for the artillery pieces that they'd be towing. So I wanted to represent the late war state that Germany was in by making more of these late war vehicles with just the bed, you know, because they didn't have a lot of the resources to commit to making, you know, better vehicles such as that. They simplified a lot of their vehicles towards the end of the war, right?
Thank you so much for taking us through all of those. Just incredible attention to detail, great building techniques. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Coming back over to Erik here, so you mentioned hundreds of minifigures on the layout. So take us through some of those minifigures, kind of how you pieced those together, where those came from, and what some of those figures represent.
All right, so there was a lot of divisions coming through here. We had a lot of SS divisions that were moving through, a lot of hair. The Fallschirmjägers particularly were instrumental in making it through. So it was a mixed bag of units, a mixed bag of divisions. So when we were choosing that, we had to go through the research of which divisions were coming through here. So we made sure that we had the correct figures for the units were there based on their collar patches and what we were going to represent. So we've got a bunch of different companies in here. TMC, Valiant Bricks, the Panzer Bricklabs, just an amalgamation of different styles because every unit had different camo patterns, and we wanted to really represent the hodgepodge and mixture of troops that would have been pouring through the gap at this time. It wasn't all one single unit coming through, just anybody that could escape was coming through. So it's a real mixture of different companies, different figures, different units. So.
And you mentioned a couple of the buildings earlier, but what are some of the other examples of some of the kind of types of buildings and architecture represented in the city here, and kind of how you captured that with LEGO?
Right, yeah, so this is an old Norman village, a traditional old Norman village. The church was from, the 1200, 1300. It's been there a very, very long time, and so had these large manors. So this isn't a typical manor that would have been around in Normandy. These were big estates. Like I said, it was cider presses. They had apple orchards. On the far side, you saw a pigeon house, which was only for people that had licenses to actually raise pigeons. So all the different things of that, learning about, Norman farming and farming in this area. We greebled them to kind of add that age. The only new building in town was kind of more towards the city, was more towards the town hall. So I just wanted to add age to the roofs, different roof stylings, the thatched roof to show some of the thatching they did in the Norman areas. So researching that, and as I said, if you go on Google Earth, you can actually see these exact buildings, except for the one that has the advertising on the side, which I really wanted to add, French 1930s advertising. They're actually all still there. So if you go up this road at Saint Lambert-sur-Dive, starting at this bridge, and just work your way up past the church, you will see those identical buildings as they are today, which is kind of neat as well. So doing the research was a big part of the fun of doing this build.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much for all the effort you put into the build here, for all of you guys involved. Really incredible layout. I always love seeing the work that you guys bring out to BrickFair each year. So keep it up. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.